Welcome to Fit to Speak from the Archives. I'm Eugene Obah, glad as ever to be with you. Today, we pick up where we left off last week with Alpha Efficiency CEO Brian Dordevic, and we speak to Masongo Ogora, who was a student at UMBC, about his college experience during the novel coronavirus pandemic. Hello and welcome to Fit to Speak. I'm Eugene Obah. So glad to have you with us. Before we continue our series about college in the COVID era, in case you need a reminder, the election is over. O-V-E-R. Over.
Joe Biden has won the American presidential election.
Donald Trump, the 45th president of the United States, who stated in this process, "I will never give up fighting for you and our nation," will be denied a second term. That has not happened since 1992 and President George H.W. Bush.
And around 80 million Americans have essentially told current, now outgoing President Donald Trump,
"You're fired. You're fired. You're fired."
But should the concept of college, that college, the one with the big lecture halls and the bad dining hall food at times, also be fired? We're going to give you a bit of a briefer by continuing our conversation about college in the novel coronavirus pandemic with Brian Dordevic of Alpha Efficiency. Later in the show, you're going to hear from Masongo Ogora, a student at UMBC, about his college experience thus far in the COVID era and how his professors have been handling the transition as the lecture hall has become virtual. And I provided an important update about a dramatic step the University of Maryland is taking post-Thanksgiving for the rest of the year. That's coming up at the end of the show, but first, let's go ahead and talk with Brian now as he talks about the competition that he believes is coming for higher education.
One level is going to be the people that didn't follow the traditional career path making more money than people that graduated. And it will ask a lot of people to put themselves in a position of questioning the entire education system. And it's already happening. I've seen that. A lot of people are just like, why would I go to school? I have programmers that just abandoned the school as a pathway, saved themselves 3 to 5 years of their life, and invested all of that time studying from home and getting a unique knowledge set that college might not have. We're building products as they've worked through the challenges that they were solving for their businesses. So Alpha Efficiency Academy is an idea that's brewing in my mind for a while. I've seen a couple of my clients, they have learning management systems integrated into the websites and allowing people to develop their knowledge set. Alpha Efficiency Academy will be geared as a platform where people can develop their skills. And it will be focused on everything that we have as a problem on a day-to-day basis. And it will give a clear set of suggestions and guidelines as to what is necessary to participate in economic activity, as opposed to what the educational system does. They're trying to teach you all these things that you may or may not need. Alpha Efficiency Academy will have an angle where we will only focus on the skills that will make you money. So once you come to us, you're not coming for knowledge per se. You're coming for curation of the knowledge that we know is lucrative. And that is a big difference. And I think that a lot of colleges moving forward will have to become curators instead of educators, because there's an infinite amount of knowledge over there. We are oversaturated with information that exists and what we can learn. But no one is out there to tell us what is really necessary. Because let's say someone went to banking and they'll learn all these things, but once they land a job in the bank, they're only going to use 5 to 10% of the knowledge that they've accumulated. So that being said, my sense is guiding me in a direction where people will be able to define the career paths. If you go to Code Academy, it's an example of a self-service education platform. You can choose, I want to have artificial intelligence career path. And as you choose that, they start giving you the courses. Complete this course first. This course unlocks the path to the second course, etc., etc., giving you the complete puzzle for that particular career path. It's like giving you a journey in a certain direction where you will get all the things needed for that particular path. And colleges don't have that. There is no one-to-one conversation with the student because it's a one-size-fits-all or one-size-fits-many instead of this is your path, your journey, and try to determine where do you want to go. Because the needs of the employers are very specific, and sometimes these needs change because you have, let's say we acquire a client that needs to develop a machine learning platform. At this point in time, I need more machine learning engineers that have that very specific knowledge set, and nobody else on my team can facilitate that need. So I need to go outside of the box. Machine learning is not. I don't even know if there's a lot of colleges that are learning that as a main curriculum. So, and even once you get there, it needs to be a part of the bigger picture. Like you knowing just machine learning is not going to make you a machine learning problem solver, because you might need to know also how to run a server and how to manage a computer on which machine learning platform that you're building is going to run on. This is like a common problem that I'm identifying with a lot of programmers that come to my team. They know how to code, and that's all they don't know how to do. But as soon as I ask them, can you run this code on a computer? Can you set it up? Like they're confused. They don't know what is. They don't have an elementary knowledge as juniors to set up a script to run on a computer. They just learn how to code. So their knowledge is in this silo. But solving a problem from A to Z, setting up a web app or a mobile app, it requires that you know DevOps, that you know design skills a little bit, to know how to code. It's a little bit of everything in order to get things running, in order to get things moving. So that is a significant difference from specialization. We're moving away from the era of specialization. Specialization is way behind us. People that are making strides, that are making moves, they are solving multiple levels of problem at the same time. If you're solving only one piece of the puzzle, your value to the overall economy is not as big as when you're solving multiple problems. So that's something that I could speak from experience more so than from education, that people that can solve multiple challenges at the same time, even at the basic level, they move further ahead than people that are specialized and can do only one thing, because you're capped. Like you're a programmer and the average salary is $100,000 a year. And once you reach that average, like there's not much more where you can move. But being an entrepreneur or an intrapreneur inside of the organization will move you way further ahead than the average of your knowledge set. So that's the biggest distinction that I'm seeing evolving, and people that are quick to understand things, that are talented, they are moving faster than people that are narrow-minded in the way that they're approaching their education.
Yeah. So really, and I think a lot of this has been stuff that even I have thought about, reflecting on my college experience, that, so is it really like people are now at this stage of the game, is it important to, but more, let me back that up a little bit. Is it important now at this stage to be more of a general rather than, say, a specialist? Do I have that right?
So it really depends on the needs of a company and the knowledge that you're delivering to your employer or to your organization. I think that there will always be a space for specialists, but being a generalist, your agility in the economy is much higher than someone who is a specialist, because you. So, for example, when COVID hit, our company took losses. Like we got pummeled on the market. But because we never focused on any given niche, the entire customer base that we lost in 1 month. In the next 2 months, we actually found a lot of new customers that were innovating in the COVID tech, or that actually benefited from the changes in turbulence in the market. And this agility that's transferred through my entire organization as a mindset that we are not pigeonholed, we're not specialists, we're not depending on one vertical, allowed us to adapt and not to feel the consequences of the COVID recession that was relatively short. I think everyone can say at this point that the COVID recession wasn't as bad as everyone anticipated that it is going to be. So that's the layout of the game. But we've seen something different happen. There's a organization over here, digital agency that provides services exclusively to the travel industry. Travel industry got decimated. Entire team of this company got furloughed, their jobs frozen until further notice, and God knows if they will recover as a company, because the industry completely changed. So the more specialized you are, the more you are married to the outcome of your field as a whole. And if God forbid your jobs get outsourced to the machine learning, and there's no more need for a white collar job in that space, you're out of luck. So we need to live in the economy that is constantly evolving. I mean, the next jobs that are on the chopping block are menial attorney work that will be resolved with machine learning, as well as the CPA work, because the advent of the H&R Block, automated software, TurboTax, and all these similar tools, they're really hammering and pummeling down the CPAs as the service providers. So as the time evolves, the white collar jobs are on the line. With the automation, we eliminated a lot of blue collar work, and automation really brought a hard consequences to a lot of blue collar worker. White collar workers have been excluded from this conversation for a while, and machine learning will introduce a massive disruption into this space. And a lot of people that felt that their jobs were safe, cushy, that they didn't have anything to worry about, are coming to a position now where their jobs will be on a chopping block, and they will have to change and adapt, and their knowledge set that they invested a lot of years throughout their life to hone in and specialize in is not relevant anymore. So people will have to learn how to adjust in the new economy. So creativity is one of the things that machines won't be able to replicate anytime soon. So any creative endeavor is definitely going to stay in the game, and people that can adapt to this ever-changing landscape of the economy are the ones who will have the staying power in the economic redistribution of wealth.
In thinking about the points that you made about that adaptability and the flexibility in terms of which sectors are going to work out, and which stuff is going to kind of stay the course, especially in this era, and which stuff will become kind of sort of automated and everything else, and will we have, some people will say, oh, the robots are going to take over and that sort of thing. But we're going to have students already that are in college, who a lot of students are doing virtual learning during this pandemic, and they're going to be graduating. Some of them are going to be graduating in December. Okay. And the question is, what does, and you kind of touched on this earlier, what does that modern workforce look like for those students? And what advice do you have for the students that are about to enter this new workforce, especially in terms of this pandemic, because we still have a pandemic going on. As we said, a lot of these industries have become decimated. You've talked about, some of the stuff that's happening around Chicago and everything else. What do you think is going to be happening here, especially in these coming months?
So as far as the coming months, I'm not an Nostradamus. I'm not a prophet. Like I can't really predict. What I'm seeing that workforce dramatically changed. Work from home is here to stay. Twitter and a couple other tech companies introduced work from home as a permanent policy. So one of the things that I do recommend, if you're not used to working from home, develop a skill set how you can make your home a place of work, because a lot of opportunities that are coming down the road will be home centric. For young people, that will not be a challenge. For people that are already in the workforce, and they will have to adjust. And I have a good advice for anyone who's leaving college. Everything that they've taught you at college, take it with a big grain of salt. I'm not saying that what they've teach you was a complete lie, but I am saying that the axioms and the facts that were relegated to you might not be the facts tomorrow. So learn how to adapt in this environment. Observe your employment as a business. Think about yourself as a company, not as an individual. Whether you will really start a company or will you stay an employee, it's completely irrelevant. You still have to have checks and balances in place to learn how to navigate the new system. And just because you finished school, this is probably the biggest advice of all advices that I have for anyone leaving college. Your learning has just begun. You're far from stopping with the learning, unless you don't want to progress and have some economic stability. The moment you stop learning, your economic participation is dwindling and shrinking, as you are not in a position to provide more value to the ecosystem around you. So as soon as you walk out of the college, start learning, because everything you've done so far, you've accumulated a certain knowledge set. Now is the time to start reading the books, and now is the time to be even more motivated about learning than you were during the college time, ironically.
It's ironic, right? It is indeed, especially given your tweet over the last month in September. I mean, Brian, I have to tell you, this has been a fascinating discussion, and we are going to be keeping an eye on alpha efficiency, okay? Especially with some of the work that you are doing with this academy that you're creating, and hopefully we will have you on again to talk more about it, and maybe we'll come down. Maybe our show will come to Chicago someday, maybe post-pandemic, to check out this academy and see what you're doing with it. But I thank you so much, Brian Dordevic, the lead strategist at Alpha Efficiency, also the founder and owner. Thank you so much for joining me today.
It was great having you.
Joining me now is Masongo Ogora, a senior media and communication studies major at UMBC. Masongo, welcome. It's so nice to have you on, and let's go ahead and get started. So let's take a bit of a temperature check. We are very much into the thick of the fall semester in many of the colleges and universities across the country, of course, also at UMBC. So let's look at this. How's the semester going for you so far?
Honestly, I'm struggling. Like I'm mentally just drained, but somehow pushing through. It's actually kind of a miracle right now since I'm doing really well, but I'm mostly just trying to fulfill the deadlines and trying to just show up for classes and everything.
How has that been in this pandemic, these deadlines? Because we know that there are some of the professors who we have a lot of professors who are doing this stuff virtually, and of course, there's been some inequalities as well in terms of some students not having the equipment that they need to have and that sort of thing. What have you been seeing, on your end as far as the flexibility of some of the professors in terms of being accommodating to some of the students, especially with deadlines and so on and so forth?
Well, in terms of the professors and their deadlines, and at least in my situation, everything has been going pretty smoothly. I think it's more so students need to work with the professors in terms of just operating the online ecosystem, because I think like outside of social media, people are dealing with their own individual stuff, and they may feel that it's too overwhelming. And usually, for what I do personally, I try to keep in contact with my teachers, try to do at least the best I can on these assignments, because I think at this point in time, in terms of at least in my college career, I don't think the grades necessarily really matter in terms of the long scheme of things, because at the end of the day, we've gone from a grading scale to simply fulfilling a deadline in which we are graded according to however the professor sees fit. So I have professors who are lenient graders because of the pandemic. The other ones are simply, I guess, going as they would in the in-person setting. So it really just varies on, I guess, the course you're taking and like your major in terms of how certain professors may do things. But as far as my professors at UMBC, they've been very grateful and gracious in terms of leniency.
Which is definitely a very good thing. And I think there's a lot to be said about the grading and all of that, especially in terms of some of the majors and all of that. So, for instance, for some of the, let's say, pre-med majors and that sort of thing. Now, of course, I would want a doctor who has had very good grades. I would not want to have a doctor who's got an F, so that sort of thing. Whereas for the kind of stuff that you're doing with media and communications, and I was a journalism major during my time at Maryland. The grades really, I mean, yes, you have to know stuff. Don't get it twisted. Yeah, you do have to have a modicum of knowledge, but in all of the jobs and everything else, most people, I would say probably everybody in the industry doesn't really care. And in fact, I don't think it's even asked as to, what, I even tell people, it's like, your GPA and all of that. Most of these employers couldn't care less about what your GPA was, in college and everything else. So there is definitely, definitely a lot to be said there. It's just wild what's been going on, especially with this pandemic. And again, I'm glad to hear that the professors, at least with the kind of stuff that, uh, at least with the kind of stuff that you've been doing, have been very flexible in terms of accommodating folks and the deadlines and what have you. And that kind of leads me to this: how is your major approaching this new normal, this environment in this pandemic? Has it been a virtual stuff? Has it been a hybrid model? Have there been an in-class stuff? What's been going on there? Tell our viewers about that.
So for my major at UMBC, we've mostly been doing things online. So everything is pretty much online. As far as that process, it has been, I would say, actually, I want to start from March, because when we first did this, I was like coming off of spring break. It was around my spring break time, and we were pretty much told to stay home. And outside of housing, where I had to go back and get my stuff later on in the summer, it pretty much was really rocky at first, because teachers were like teachers were transitioning, and like with the age gap of the teachers and the students and such, some of them may have not been as technologically advanced. So now, the difference between then and now is mostly that we weren't entering in the middle of the semester, and a lot of teachers now have taken classes on how to teach online over the summer. So in terms of the current situation, it's been actually pretty fine for the most part. I don't have any complaints. Other students might, but I personally don't have any complaints, because I mean, at the end of the day, it really goes back to it being a student dependent model in which the student has to really push their weight in terms of like what they can do, because like with the teacher, you can only meet them halfway. And if they're already doing what they need to do, then you as a student need to have you need to take the responsibility and accountability to make sure you are doing your part in terms of turning the assignments in, coming to class, and applying what you learn outside of classes, in the sense of learning. Because like for myself, I haven't really learned anything. Like I haven't really opened my books this semester. but I paid for them, I rented them, and I'm somehow thriving, I guess, because most of it is common sense, at least for my major. But I can only imagine how STEM students, and not only like STEM students, but also other people who are challenged in socioeconomic areas who may not have the luxuries that I have or any other person may have in terms of living status. I wonder how they are trudging through the semester.
Yeah, is there something to be said about the inequalities in terms of the college experience? Because I think you pick up on an interesting point where it's like, is it dependent on the major where some of these inequalities can be exacerbated? So, for instance, like an English major, for example, in terms of reading a lot of Shakespeare and all that, it's like, okay, well, you can get a lot of this stuff on the line, that sort
Right.
of thing, maybe through, I don't know if whether or not they'll have the stuff on, like, say, Kindle or whatever, but, and all that. But then it's like somebody else, especially some of these labs where you may need more resources. For some students, I guess, for some poor students, that could be a problem, right?
Yes, I think it definitely could be a huge problem in the near future in the sense of to kind of go back and focus on the impoverished students. I think schools should definitely pay attention to that and actually provide more incentive towards how they can get certain resources to students, whether it be an iPad, a laptop, earphones, especially noise canceling earphones, because if you're in a household where you cannot really have the space to study physically, much less alone mentally, it's very strenuous, and that was pretty much my situation. Coming from an African household, it's and being like the firstborn child, there's a lot of cultural ideology there in which you can't necessarily break away from, even though I was born and raised here, but my parents are Kenyan.
Hmm.
So in the sense of like, I could have definitely stayed home, but I was like, do I want to like go get groceries during the class and stuff where I have to be present and like walk my dog and like, have to take care of my grandmother who's living with us and she's sick. It's like as much as I can do those things, like I feel like it really affects my sense of studying, my sense of like independence, in the sense of trying to figure out who I am as an adult, as a man, as a black man in the country, especially because with kids transitioning into college and like even students are still trying to figure themselves out, like that's the importance of college, I think, in education overall, especially as a young adult. So to schools, I think they should definitely provide the technology if they have the resources, if they have the money to do so. But for those students who are doing STEM or hands-on related courses, I think schools could be more lenient on those things, because I know like a lot of stuff is hands-on research and all that, and at least to go back to my major, being a media and communication student, I haven't had to necessarily go out of my way too much to do to sorry, record audio and visual stuff in terms of assignments.
Hmm.
So I think they could be they could try to be more lenient, or like kind of abolish labs and stuff altogether, and kind of somehow try to make a hybrid course, or somehow try to compensate for their replacement, for replacing something, at least for the lab section.
And it kind of gets into the kind of the model of college experience and everything else. Now, we had somebody on recently, Brian Dordevic, who talked about an alpha efficiency academy that he will eventually create as kind of the model to try and if not disrupt the college model, but to kind of compete, with, the traditional model of college, because traditionally it's like, okay, people like yourself and, so many of the other college students across this country would be in lecture halls or maybe in small seminar, type of, classes and so on and so forth. And then it's like you, in the case of, media stuff, in case of journalism, you'll be out in the field, doing some of these projects and all that. But right now, this is not the case, with this pandemic. And one of the things that I've said to a lot of people quite candidly is that really the future, I think, is now, because this virtual learning, and going back to some stuff that you just said earlier about what happened in March, when everybody, professors and everything, were kind of sort of scrambling to uh, adapt to this model. And then, of course, during the summer, they had the benefit of time to adjust for those things. I'll be honest with you, I believe that this would have been the case, a lot of online stuff, 20 years from now, 30 years from now, 40 years from now. But all of that has accelerated to the forefront. So I don't know. Does that, I think you already kind of sort of touched on this, but does that model change? Does the model of college as a whole, as we know it, as you know it, as I know it, as much of the public knows it, as much of our viewers know, does the model of college change? You'll hear Masongo's response to that and a lot more about his experience and the mental health aspects of it in a future edition of Fit to Speak. And one other note before we go today, the University of Maryland, that is the College Park campus, announced recently that after having done a hybrid model this fall semester, that after Thanksgiving, all classes, with limited exceptions, will become entirely online, and that those who leave the campus for Thanksgiving should remain off campus for the balance of the semester. Now, keep in mind that in October it was announced that students, if they wanted to leave the campus for Thanksgiving recess, that they could return to the campus, but with a couple of provisos. The first one being they must be tested and report any positive result. And that number two, they would have to quarantine until December 12th, that is 2 days prior to the last day of classes. Let's not forget the impetus, really, for this decision. The impetus for this decision is that the cases of the coronavirus have gone up in Maryland, especially in Montgomery and Prince George's counties, the latter of which is where the University of Maryland is based. And there will be some questions, I believe, as to whether or not the university should have done this in the beginning of the semester as opposed to now. And here's another decision that was just made. The University of Maryland's Department of Residence Life announced that the quarantine and isolation housing will close on December 8th, just 2 weeks prior to the end of the fall semester. Now, some of you in our viewing audience may recall that on the October 29th edition of this program, we talked about the quarantine and isolation housing with Diamondback reporter Clara Longo de Freitas, who reported on the developments from the perspective of an employee who works in said housing. It's an episode worth revisiting, as with all of our shows, of course, on vimeo.com/CSE Media. So what happens to all the students in the quarantine housing and to those who test positive for the virus on or after December 8th? They'll have to quarantine at home, wherever that is. And just as an aside, it may not be so easy, whether it's finances or where they live, for students to make this change at a moment's notice. And speaking of a moment's notice, as we were getting ready to upload this program, the university's athletic department announced that the football program will pause all team-related activities, citing the fact that 8 players tested positive for the coronavirus, and that the game against Ohio State, scheduled for the 14th of November, which would have no fan attendance at Maryland Stadium, will not happen and will not be rescheduled. One thing is clear: the novel coronavirus pandemic is not going away anytime soon. We are still in a global pandemic with over 240,000 Americans, and counting sadly, killed because of no plan from the outgoing administration. The incoming administration, that is, the Biden administration, that is something that they will have to contend with come January 20th. And we here at CSE Media will continue to keep an eye on these developments. Next week on Fit to Speak from the Archives, we brought in a mega panel to discuss the outcome of the 2020 election, which, in case there's still any doubt, Donald Trump lost. Democratic strategist Kristen Foka, conservative commentator Taylor Maupin, journalist, media entrepreneur, and cultural creative Marcus K. Dowling, and Common Sense Entertainment creative director Rahim Dawood Jr. joined me at the virtual Thanksgiving table in 2020, and it was quite a lively discussion, so I hope you'll be able to join us. In the meantime, be sure to follow us on all of our social media accounts, and be sure to check out our Substack and Patreon pages for exclusive content and to support all of the work that we do here. Finally, don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell on our YouTube channel so that you do not miss any of our episodes. Until next week, I'm Eugene Obah. Thank you so much for watching, and remember, the best things in life are worth saving.